Hello, welcome. I'm so glad to have you with us here today at Penobscot Marine Museum. Did you see our last video where we looked closely at this painting? Do you have any thoughts about where it might be or who might have painted it? There is a note. It was probably written sometime in the 20th century after the painting was made. Probably it was an attempt by someone to write down what they had been told some years previous. The note says that Dollie Smith painted this painting around 1898 for Dr. Elisha Hopkins and his wife Cynthia Adams. And indeed, on the back of the frame is written Mrs. Hopkins. Now, Dollie Smith's gravestone is in the village cemetery on Mount Ephraim Road. It says she died in 1891, so she can't have painted this painting in 1898. But is it still possible that some parts of the note are correct? Let's see if we can figure that out. We made another video all about Dollie Smith, and the link to that is below if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, you might remember Dollie included details of wildflowers, specifically goldenrod, in the corners of at least two of her other landscape paintings, just like this one. So I do think that Dollie painted this painting. An interesting aside, also in that video, our education director, Gina, noticed that the spelling of Dolly is different in different places. In a catalog of her work published by the museum in 1994, it's written D-O-L-L-Y, but on her gravestone, which was paid for by her friends, it's spelled D-O-L-L-I-E. Interestingly, the note about this painting also spells her name I-E. The census from 1850 lists her spelled with a Y, so that's probably where the historians went wrong in writing the catalog. The census taker is some stranger walking around asking everyone to list verbally who lives in the house, and the census taker writes down what he hears phonetically. So we definitely don't trust the census taker, and we do trust Dollie's friend. So what do we know about Cynthia and Elisha, the people who commissioned the painting? Cynthia and Elisha lived in Searsport. Elisha was born in 1829 in Hamden, Maine. He was a physician, receiving his degree from Harvard in 1854, and served as a surgeon in the Civil War. Elisha married Oriana Fowler in 1859. Oriana Fowler was the daughter of Rufus Fowler and Libby Beals, who lived in the Fowler House, which is part of our museum. Elisha and Oriana had a little baby in 1860 who died within the year. Oriana died herself in 1866 at the age of 28. In 1868, Elisha married Cynthia. She was born in Camden in 1836. Their daughter Ella was born in 1870. A son Elisha was born, but he died at age 6. So Dr. Elisha Hopkins experienced a lot of loss in his life. Soon after this painting was made, in 1906, daughter Ella married Joseph E. Sweetser, cousin of Jane Sweetser Colcord. We talked about Libby Beals, mother of Oriana, in the Women on Land video, and we talked about Jane Sweetser in Life at Sea. That was our first Peek into Paintings video. Ella had no children, and the painting was passed to a family friend. Ella inherited a fascination with genealogy from her dad, Elisha. Our museum has a number of papers from Ella, including many pages of genealogy research. Elisha Hopkins applied to the Mayflower Society with records showing that Stephen Hopkins was an ancestor. You may have heard of Stephen Hopkins. He was born in Hampshire, England in 1581. In 1609, he embarked on the Sea Venture, headed for Virginia, leaving his wife and children behind. They landed in Bermuda after nearly sinking in a raging storm. They lived on Bermuda for a bit while they made various attempts to build boats and try to continue on their way to Virginia. Stephen Hopkins was sentenced to death for mutiny and pardoned. In 1610, they made it to Virginia, found it a mess. The inexperienced, proud, and starving English settlers were too racist to trade with the Powhatan for food. In 1614, Hopkins went back to England to care for his children after their mother's death. In 1620, with his second wife and children, he left England once again aboard the Mayflower. And you've heard the rest of that story. The story of the wreck of the Sea Venture on Bermuda is thought to be an inspiration for Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. The note also says that the painting depicts Searsport, which would make sense as both Dr. Hopkins and Dollie Smith lived here. The church steeple definitely looks like the Methodist steeple right in the village still standing today. The landmarks surrounding the water do look like Searsport Harbor, with Northport on the right and Islesboro on the left. But as Sipperley tells us, you don't see this view of the harbor from the pond, so how much has Dolly changed this scene? We have a couple of maps of Searsport, one from 1859 and one from 1890. Let's look at the map from 1890, as that's very close to the time when this painting was probably made. This map is from the Library of Congress website, which I love. The music in our first video of the skating scene also came from there. I recommend checking it out. Lots of cool stuff on there. So this map was made by the Sanborn Insurance Company. So they have one single focus, which is fire. All the information on this map relates to how likely a fire might be. So the colors tell you what the building is made of. Yellow is a wood frame. Red is brick. We can see Old Vestry and Fowler House, still preserved in the Penobscot Marine Museum. Here is the Methodist Church. And we can see here the commercial district with the large brick buildings that are still there. And many workshops. I see shipyards, harness makers, tin shop, paint mill, coal storage, corn storage. Dolly definitely didn't include any of these industries in her painting. Notice this large building here called Searsport House. It's even larger than the big commercial blocks. It's the largest building on the map. This was a very imposing structure, just a few doors up from the pond. You would see it if you were standing by the pond looking towards the village, but it's not in the painting. Down at the bottom of the map, it's cut off, but you can see a home with two bay windows. This house is still there, right up the slope from Mill Pond. Beautiful old house. So in Dolly's painting, we didn't see any homes with bay windows. Were bay windows a new style for Dolly? She was born in 1824. Was Dolly going for what she thought was an older, more timeless look? Unfortunately, the map stops at the edge of Mill Brook, the area that we want the most. So even though it's older, let's look at the 1859 map to see if it can fill in some details that this map doesn't show. So this is the map of Searsport from 1859. The map shows Mill Brook. And we can see that same home with the bay windows here. Here we see a large mill. The mill was still there when Dolly painted this scene. The mill will be a large, prominent building right by where the skaters are. Let's go back to her painting. I don't see a large mill, so Dolly definitely decided to leave that out. Where that house with the bay windows would be is this yellow house, which looks actually more like Fowler House, which is part of our museum. But that would be up in the cluster of buildings here. So this painting definitely has elements of Searsport, like Mill Pond, the Methodist church steeple, and the harbor. But Dollie Smith clearly decided to make some changes. What do you think? Why do you think she made decisions to leave parts of this neighborhood out? What do you think she was going for here? Please put your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. In our next video, we will hunt down some additional sources to gather more information about the decisions Dollie made when she created this painting. Perhaps we can find some insights into her goals with the painting. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.